You know, this main event that we are looking at this weekend is absolutely fantastic. As a hardcore mixed martial arts fan, UFC fan, which I'm assuming most of you are if you're tuning into my show, you are jacked for this main event. Brian Ortega challenging Max Holloway for the featherweight title. In my opinion, it could be one of the most complete displays of mixed martial arts we've seen in a long time. Two of the most complete and well-rounded and capable fighters in the primes of their careers at the height of two impressive winning streaks going head-to-head for the championship. We'll talk a little bit about some of the caveats when we get to actually predicting that fight. But my issue is that this fight should be blowing up, and yet it's really gaining next to no publicity. And it's because we don't have a Conor McGregor or a Ronda Rousey or a George St. Pierre or a John Jones type fighter in this fight. And yet here we have, you know, in my opinion, both these guys beat Conor McGregor at this point, as far as I'm concerned. And yet we're not getting the heat. And you have to point the finger at the UFC and say, why is this fight not getting this mainstream attention? You know, what have you done wrong that two of your top talents fighting for a world championship is not gaining this notoriety that should be? And it's just, again, it's the way they're producing stars and the way they're marketing stars. They had their mainstream stars like their Chuck Liddells and their Tito Ortiz and their Randy Couture's. We moved on to Anderson Silva and George St. Pierre. We got that touch with Conor and Ronda and John Jones, and now we seem to be past that where we're like, who's next? You know, it should be these guys. It should be these fighters in the prime of their careers, and it's not, and that's concerning. Either way, I'm absolutely looking forward to the fight, and we will predict it shortly. Welcome back to Kamikaze Overdrive MMA Predictions. Always, I am your host, Scott Johnson. And on this episode of the show, we are breaking down the upcoming UFC 231 pay-per-view, which will take place on December 8th, 2018, and will be emanating from my backyard in Toronto, Ontario, Canada, at the Scotiabank Arena. I'll be giving you my 5 main card predictions on this episode of the show. All of my preliminary picks will be available at kamikazeoverdrive.net. Now, I'm coming off a solid prediction weekend. Out of 25 fights, I got 18 correct. I went 18-7. You know, I picked a couple upsets up, not many. There were a number of lopsided matchups which I got correct, and there were a couple of very close fights which I got correct. I was overall happy with my performance, I was satisfied but not super excited. The Friday night event snapped my 7-fight winning streak in main events. I had Rafael dos Anjos to pull off the upset. He didn't. My bet packs the first time in 7 cards did not produce a profit. Now we go to the next night, UFC Fight Night 142. I got the main event right, picking Junior dos Santos, and actually all of my gold plays won. I had Junior, and then I had, just quickly looking at it here, I had Junior, and then I had, I'm drawing a blank. Tony Martin, Nikita Nakamura as a parlay. So my gold plays won everywhere. I basically doubled your money in your big risk, big reward investment, and unfortunately, I basically broke even in the big bankroll. I was looking for one more win out of somebody that would have put me over the top. Again, there weren't a lot of big fights we could bet on in that card, so we made the most of what was available. We needed one more win to really take home a big return. But again, my bet packs will be available for UFC 231, just $15. I break down the entirety of the card, betting breakdowns, parlays, props, single bets, betting scenarios, value bets, confidence picks, everything, fantasy bets. I don't think I said that already. I do a ton of analysis of the card, and it's $15. A lot of you pay $50-$60 for some packs out there. It's just $15 for mine, and you can even get a little bit cheaper if you subscribe for the rest of 2018. Also, if you're looking for a place to bet, melbet.org is a great website that has a lot of betting options. There is a link in the description below that you can check out. For both mixed martial arts and sports in general, they have just a ridiculous amount of options. So if you're looking for a place to bet, certainly check out melbet.org, and they are actually sponsoring this video as well, so look into that option. You can follow me on Twitter at KO_predictions. I do as much tweeting as I possibly can. Sometimes I'm just unavailable on nights of the fights, or I'm too busy, or sometimes just too tired to tweet frequently, but I'll do my best. I want to give a shout out to one of my followers who has religiously been supporting me, Craig Hawk. Thank you very much for all the positive messages and things on Twitter. And I did get your email, and I plan to reply to it. I'm just trying to get this video posted, and I will be shooting you an email here very shortly. On that note, we have 5 really fun fights to break down, so let's get to that first main card prediction. We kick off the main card in the UFC's light heavyweight division as the 7th-ranked Jimi poster boy Manuwa, 17-3-0, takes on the 15th-ranked Thiago. Santos, the current record of 19 wins and 6 losses, formerly fighting at middleweight, appears to be headed up to light heavyweight in the at least foreseeable future. Manuwa currently coming in as the underdog, which could surprise many. At melbet.org, they have him at plus 173. Santos, the return at minus 208. Now, Santos comes into this matchup having won back-to-back bouts and 6 of 7. His only loss, a knockout loss against David Branch. For Jimi Manuwa, he has lost back-to-back bouts to Jan Blachowicz and Volkan Ozdemir. He is just 2-3 over his last 5 appearances. Now, this fight was actually originally scheduled to take place in late September in Brazil. It was one of those matchups that just deteriorated significantly. It was originally supposed to feature Jimi Manuwa taking on Glover Teixeira. Teixeira pulled out, Thiago Santos stepped in, but then Manuwa pulled out and Eryk Anders stepped in, and then Thiago defeated him. Santos, again, as we said, has fought primarily at middleweight. He fought Anders also a middleweight at light heavyweight, so you really haven't seen him against a true 205er, but we'll get to see that here. He's actually 1 inch taller than Manuwa. Jimi will have a 3-inch reach advantage, and the Brazilian is the younger man by 4 years. Now, both guys, when you look at their records, they are violent knockout artists. Santos, 13 of his 19 wins by knockout. For Manuwa, 15 of his 17 wins by TKO or KO. On the flip side, both guys have also suffered multiple knockout losses. Santos has been stopped 3 times by knockout. The aforementioned David Branch, Gegard Mousasi, and Vincente Luque, who's fighting at welterweight, took him out a number of years ago on the regional scene. For Manuwa, he's also suffered 3 knockout losses to Volkan Ozdemir, Rumble Johnson, and Alexander Gustafsson stopping him. Now, the first question when you look at all these things is, how does Thiago Santos' power translate at 205 pounds versus a legit 205er? The 3 men that stopped Manuwa have a combined 38 wins by knockout, so that's big power. It's no easy task to get him out of there, even though some people might say, hey, he's got a weak chin. But I will tell you this much. When he fought Jan Blachowicz in his last fight, he seemed very hesitant to engage early on, coming off that Ozdemir knockout. He was waiting for him to engage. Then he got rocked early in that fight when he did attack and when he did engage. He ultimately went the distance, but it just wasn't a great performance. For Santos, his 2 UFC knockouts, on the flip side of things, his 2 UFC knockouts have come off grappling exchanges. One getting stopped in the clinch, the other one against Mousasi. He was getting back up from a takedown. So that tells you if you can get him out of his element, that's when he's most vulnerable. Manuwa, for the most part, is a boxer, still very serviceable kicker with some very good knee strikes, especially in close. For Santos, he's a more diversified Muay Thai-based kickboxer. He does his best work with his kicks, and he can also do a lot of damage inside with his knees in the clinch. Now, when you look at how these guys pair up, Santos should have the speed advantage to go along with superior work rate and cardio. Those are all big check marks in his favor. Manuwa overall 4-3 in the UFC when fights go outside of the first round, compared to Santos, who is 6-1. Thiago also averages 1.5 significant strikes more per minute than Manuwa. So the action, if it goes beyond the opening round, it certainly favors the Brazilian, as Manuwa is known to slow down and really start to become a stationary target. Now, on the flip side, Jimi is incredibly capable of ending this fight with 1 punch. But again, once he starts to slow down, that likelihood drops off the table and he becomes far less effective. More ineffective, let's go with less effective. Jimi likes to stall and use the clinch, which is something he's had some success with in the past, but that's a position he wants to be very careful with against Santos, who can do a lot of damage from that position with elbows, with knees. We saw him beat up Elias Theodorou in a fight there. You also have to consider the fact that Thiago's shown he's got some grappling chops against Kevin Holland. He took him down. He had some success keeping him on the mat. He could look for takedowns here. Even if he doesn't land them, just the threat of them could tire Manuwa out having to defend them. I think Santos in this fight, he has to be careful taking a big shot from Manuwa. I think he's going to outwork him. He's going to overwhelm Manuwa in rounds 2 and 3, use those kicks, and just keep putting the volume and pace on him. It very well could go the distance, but my prediction is Thiago Santos to defeat Jimi Manuwa by TKO. In the UFC's featherweight division, Canadian mean Hakeem Dawodu, 8 wins, 1 loss, and 1 draw, takes on Kyle Crash Bochniak with a record of 8 wins and 3 defeats. Currently, Dawodu comes into the favorite at minus 176. Bochniak, the return, as the underdog, plus 147. Now, Dawodu's coming off a decision victory over Austin Arnett, his first win in the UFC. He lost his debut in an upset to Danny Henry, the first career loss of his career. For Bochniak, overall, 2 wins and 3 losses in the side the octagon. He does have a questionable victory over Enrique Barzola. He beat Davis in his last victory, coming off a decision loss to Zabit Magomed Sharapov in a fight that got him a lot of recognition. Dawodu comes in as an inch taller. He'll have a 3-inch reach advantage, and he's the younger fighter by 4 years. That's the interesting defeats here. Dawodu had that loss 39 seconds in his debut. It took a little bit of the shine off of him getting knocked down and then submitted. Really hurt his standing. But for Bochniak, he went the distance with Magomed and really was quite impressive in that performance. He's the first man in 11 fights to do that. He lost, but it certainly gained him some notoriety that he didn't have before. Now, looking first at the Canadian, Dawodu, not a lot of frantic volume and aggression. He fights at a very measured and efficient pace, which is really nice to see. He throws a lot of good leg kicks, hard leg kicks, attacking both the inside and outside leg, and really targeting that lead leg, taking away the movement of his opponent. He'll also mix in some other techniques, turning side kicks. He'll throw a head kick very quick with his leg techniques. When he's punching, he throws a nice hook to the body, and he will start combos with body shots and then end them with low kicks, which is very nice when he mixes it up and throws some nice diversified offense. Now, Dawodu, on the other side of things, he is susceptible to right hands and body lock takedowns, and those are two vulnerabilities he's going to need to tie up. Austin Arnett was having a lot of success cracking him with some right hands once he started attacking, and that's what Danny Henry dropped him with, a right hand before getting the submission. So that's worth noting coming into this matchup. Now, for Kyle Bochniak, he's started to gain a reputation, as far as I'm concerned, as being kind of a smart fighter. He's not showing the same look every time he comes out there. When he fought Brandon Davis, a guy who wanted to brawl and throw down with him, he used a lot of movement, remained technical, really frustrated him, and won the fight as a result. He was in and out of that in that matchup and didn't really engage, and it frustrated Davis, and it brought the best out of Bochniak. Then when he fought Magomed, who's a much more technical fighter, he brawled him. He took that approach: you brawl the technician, you brawl the guy who's got a technical edge, and you try and draw him out of his comfort zone. And he had some success. He landed some big shots on a guy who, for the most part, had been almost untouchable leading up to that fight. I do like the way he was stepping into that matchup and throwing multiple punches and combinations. He closed the gap very well against a much taller and longer fighter, and that's nice to see. He's got a quick right jab. He was winging that right hand and coming close on multiple occasions. Again, Magomed a very talented fighter who will probably be contending for the title in the not-too-distant future. It's exciting to know he's out there considering what we have in our main event tonight. Davis was having success landing some low kicks against Bochniak, which is something Dawodu will need to look to really take away some of that movement. Bochniak, when he looks for takedowns, which he will do, he'll dive in a single leg, push his opponent into the cage. He turned the corner very effectively. And again, in that fight against Davis, 3 takedowns. Again, really focused on frustrating a guy who wanted to throw down and exchange in the center of the cage. Now, I expect to see Bochniak come out and look to brawl Dawodu, take a similar approach to what he did against Magomed, simply because Hakeem's a very technical fighter. Hakeem likes to have the opportunity to set up his strikes and land his offense. He does not want to be bull rushed. Bochniak does offer that type of right hand that can hurt him if it lands, and he's not afraid to throw it, and I like that, and he can close distance with it. Dawodu needs to land leg kicks with regularity, hammer that lower half of Kyle, keep him backing up, taking away his movement, and making him a stationary target. The key to beating Bochniak has been takedowns so far. He's given up 13 over his last 2 defeats. That's not Dawodu's style. Look for Kyle Bochniak to push forward, brawl, back him up, limit those kicking exchanges, pick up some takedowns periodically, potentially in that big right hand, which could lead to a knockout or submission opportunity. But my prediction is Kyle Bochniak to defeat Hakeem Dawodu by decision. We're going to bump up a couple weight classes for our next matchup. It takes place in the UFC's welterweight division as the 13th ranked Alex Cowboy Oliveira, 19 wins, 4 losses, 1 draw, and 2 no contest, takes on the 14th ranked Gunnar Gunny Nelson, fighting out of Iceland with a record of 16 wins, 3 losses, and 1 draw. Currently, Oliveira comes in as a slight underdog, plus 118. Nelson, the favorite, minus 137. Now, Oliveira, overall, he is 4-1 since his no contest against Tim Means, including a victory over Tim Means, and he's put together some pretty impressive performances, submitting Means, submitting Carlos Condit, and knocking out Ryan LaFleur, and most recently, Petter Solly. Nelson's coming off a knockout loss to Santiago Ponzinibbio. He had back-to-back submission wins over Alan Jouban and Albert Tumanov. He is 7-3 in the UFC, but just 3-3 in his last 6 fights, where he's seen a bit of a step up in competition. Gunnar comes into this fight also out 16 months after that knockout loss. He had a knee injury that scrapped a May fight with Neil Magny. Physically, both men 5'11". Oliveira is going to have a 4-inch reach advantage. They're born in the same year, so relatively, almost the same age. And now it's worth noting Oliveira is a former lightweight, so he's not cutting a lot of weight to do that. Gunnar Nelson, a very undersized guy at 170 pounds that a lot of people suggest he cut down, but he likes not having having to cut weight either. So these guys are well matched as far as physical attributes are concerned. Now Nelson comes into this matchup. He's a black belt in both karate and jiu-jitsu. Not a high volume takedown guy, but the smothering type of fighter who gets you down and you don't get back up because he's looking for that submission. He's looking for that finish. He offers a nice variety of takedown techniques. Look for that clinch and inside trip position. He'll shoot from the outside as well. And, once he gets in the mat, he's incredibly dangerous and will look for submissions. Now, on the feet, he's a capable striker. He's dropped opponents before. He uses that karate, that sideways stance, very measured, fights from range. He'll throw counters, minimal windup, and he will flurry with his hands once he closes that gap. And against Ponzinibbio early on, he was covering distance well and landing strikes. And it was catching Santiago off guard. But because he holds his hands so low and he's willing to absorb shots, we've seen him eat a lot of leg kicks in the past, damage will start to pile up. He sits back too much at times. He'll let opponents set himself up. And again, Ponzinibbio had that opportunity, cracked him with the right hand and stopped him with a flurry along the cage. Again, that could have been some of the passivity that Gunnar Nelson displays, where he's looking to set up his techniques and Ponzinibbio just beat him to the punch. Now for Alex Oliveira, when he's striking, he uses a sideways stance, and he's bouncing in and out, lots of movement, forces his opponent to cover a lot of distance to close the gap on him. He's very long, he's very quick, he almost has a very awkward, unorthodox style. He will swing and miss, likes to make fights sloppy, but it's very effective. At times, he stays very loose, sometimes a little bit too loose, but again, it works for him. Look for him to switch stances. He'll throw a lot of front kicks and low kicks. He'll work that inside low kick very effectively. When he knocked out Ryan Lafleur, he just had a well-timed uppercut. He was waiting for him to shoot, timed it, and boom, one punch put him down. Now, as far as Alex Oliveira's wrestling is concerned, his grappling, he does his best wrestling along the cage. He is very strong in the clinch. He has good balance, and he can neutralize opponent's offense in that position and go to work himself. He will work from top position. He'll look for submissions. He lost position on a couple of occasions against Carlos Condit, but he, and got his back taken and had to fend off a rear naked choke attempt, which is very concerning against a guy like Gunnar Nelson, who's very good from back mount. Now, when Ryan Lafleur, who is a type of a wrestler, a more natural wrestler, and a very big 170-pounder, he changed levels, looked for takedowns. He had success putting him on his back, but we saw Alex Oliveira, as he figured things out and got his timing down, he started to shut down those takedown attempts. He's got solid takedown defense overall. It's not perfect, and he can have some issues. And that's where Gunnar Nelson's going to have to live. He's going to have success getting him down. Gunnar needs to focus his attack on takedowns, which he usually does, but not always right away, and that's where he get himself in some trouble here. If he exchanges with Oliveira, that's where Alex is going to thrive. Let Alex get comfortable. It's going to open some doors for him to get a striking work and maybe start to land and do some damage on Gunnar and discourage him a little bit. Oliveira is a moving target, which I like. It's going to create issues for Gunnar to shoot and control. And again, if Gunnar tries to get him down from the clinch, look for Alex Oliveira to have success, again, really elevating that upper body and taking away Gunnar's ability to put him on the mat. Oliveira is the better striker. He's more dangerous. He's unorthodox. And I think that's going to slow Gunnar Nelson down. And my prediction is Alex Oliveira in the upset to defeat Gunnar Nelson by TKO. We move now to the co-main event of the evening, and what a matchup we have here. It's in the women's flyweight division, and it is for the women's flyweight championship, as the number one ranked Valentina Bullet Shevchenko, fighting out of Kurdistan with a current record of 15 wins and 3 losses, takes on the former 115-pound champion and number one ranked fighter in that division, Joanna Jedrzejczyk, fighting out of Poland with a current record of 15 wins and 2 losses. Currently, the former strawweight champion Jedrzejczyk, a massive underdog, not massive underdog, but sizable underdog at plus 294. Shevchenko coming back at minus 133. Now, this fight, as I said, will crown the new UFC women's flyweight champion and hopefully give the division a chance to get started. And ironically, at the same time, the men's flyweight division appears to be falling down. Now, Shevchenko had a crack at the 135-pound title and came close, but ultimately lost. Her only 2 losses in the UFC were against current champion Amanda Nunes. She is 4-2 overall inside the octagon, and she had an absolutely dominant debut at 125 pounds. For Jedrzejczyk, she had a victory in her last fight against Tecia Torres, getting back in the win column. She had back-to-back losses against Rose Namajunas, which cost her the title, and wasn't able to get the title back. I actually thought she won the rematch, which is unfortunate. Her current UFC record, 9 wins and 2 losses, and as the champion, she defended her title 5 times, which is damn impressive. Now, one of the things, too, when you look at these girls physically, with Joanna not making that weight cut and not getting down to 115, is that going to help her? That seemed to be an issue at 115 pounds. Could that make her a better fighter at 125 pounds? She is the taller fighter by an inch. Shevchenko will have a 2-inch reach advantage, and Valentina is the younger fighter by a year. Now, it's worth noting, these two fighters have fought on multiple occasions in the past. They actually fought 3 times as amateur kickboxers in 2005, 2006, and 2007. Shevchenko winning all 3 by decision. Now, as far as how does that play here, it's really not a factor. Shevchenko should have the confidence a little bit, knowing I've beaten this woman 3 times in previous combat experience. I don't expect it will impact Joanna at all. She is such a confident fighter. She'll shake that off and realize this is a whole other world we're seeing here. Now, both girls, no denying, they're awesome strikers. No denying that. Very sharp, lots of tools. Not huge power, but very effective. Both girls, I guess you could say they're death by accumulation type knockout fighters. When you look at what Joanna's done in the past, she destroyed Jessica Penne and destroyed Carla Esparza with just overwhelming volume and damage. And again, both were grapplers. She kept vertical, which is worth noting. For Valentina, she devastated her last opponent on the mat with ground and pound before getting the submission victory. She has no UFC knockouts on her record. As far as vertical volume, Shevchenko landed 87 significant strikes against Holly Holm. That's her best striking performance as far as standing is concerned. She was dropped early in that matchup, but she came back, and beating Holly Holm on the feet is no easy task. For Jedrzejczyk, she landed just 62 significant strikes against Tecia Torres, but when you look at the fights that she's done in the past, 145 in the Rose rematch, again, a fight I thought she won, 225 against Jessica Andrade, 177 against Karolina Kovacevic, 176 against Claudia Gadelha, and if you go all the way back to the Valerie Letourneau matchup, she landed 220. Those are some big numbers. And the volume is going to be the key for Joanna if she's going to win her second UFC title. She needs to push Shevchenko early and keep piling it up as the fight advances, and take advantage of the fact that Valentina isn't known for the output that Joanna can put on her. Shevchenko, when she fought Holly Holm on the feet, she only gave up 54 significant strikes over 5 rounds. That tells us she is a very good defensive fighter, because in that same time frame, Holly would traditionally average about 70-75 significant strikes. So that tells you how good defensively Shevchenko is, and that's going to be one of her keys here. If Joanna can keep this fight vertical, she has to close the gap and go to work, make every exchange count, pile up the damage, hurt her, and just use volume. On the flip side, Joanna's chin's been a bit of a concern. She was dropped by Rose and finished, obviously. Gadelha hurt her as well, and Shev is a bigger fighter, and she hits harder, arguably hits harder. So again, if she cracks Joanna, that could be enough to put her down. I think an even bigger issue, though, is Valentina's ground game. She has added a significant element to her attack, and that's something Joanna has not implemented into her game. Shevchenko had 5 submission wins in the regional scene, which shows that she's capable. It's more impressive to see her pick up victories in the UFC by submission, especially submitting Juliana Pena. That's impressive. Joanna has focused more of her grappling on defense, and again, I think that's actually stunted her growth and development. Shevchenko has good takedowns in the clinch. She will use that position to bully Joanna around on the cage before getting the fight to the ground. Joanna can do damage from that position as well, but I just don't see her being able to physically control that position enough to land that damage. I think Joanna needs to keep that distance and work on the volume. Ultimately, I think Valentina is going to wear her down. She's going to pick up some takedowns early in that fight, or if she can't, at least the clinch position will lead to a slowdown for Joanna, and Shevchenko getting those takedowns late. That ground and pound for Valentina is incredibly violent. The submission game is dangerous as well. Again, Joanna simply has less tools. In order to win this fight, she needs to use volume to get a decision or a stoppage. Where Valentina accuses her striking with defense to win a decision, she can use her clinch game to win a decision or a stoppage. Same thing with the takedowns. She has a submission game to draw upon once she hits the mat as well. And again, just by being able to control the action defensively and then land that volume, those are all in her favor. Where Joanna needs to pump a high amount of volume into Shevchenko to pick this up. Ultimately, I think Valentina gets the better of it, and my prediction is Valentina Shevchenko to defeat Joanna Jedrzejczyk. I'll take Shevchenko by TKO. And finally, we move to the main event of the evening, and what a fight we have on our hands here. The UFC featherweight title will be on the line as the champion, Max Blessed Holloway, returns to action with a 19-win, 3-loss record, taking on the undefeated challenger, the number 1 ranked Brian T. City Ortega, 14 wins and a single no contest, which was a victory in his UFC debut. Currently, the champion Holloway coming in at minus 114. For Ortega, he's plus 103. Now, the first time these guys were supposed to fight, it was supposed to go down back in July. Holloway pulled out with concussion-like symptoms. Very scary. Some people thought it might have been a stroke with the weight cut. He had a bad 2018. He had 3 fights where he was supposed to take place in, and none of which went down. So that's concerning. And as I said in my intro, this, in my opinion, has the potential to be the best all-around display of mixed martial arts we have ever seen. But we have the Max injury situation and the layoff. That certainly could taint it and creates an out if he loses. Well, I'm not 100%. Well, I was rusty. He won't make those excuses, but we certainly will make them for him if that's the case. Had he come off a win over Frankie Edgar heading into this matchup, it would just, and he fought like 6 or 7 months ago, oh my gosh, what a fight we'd be looking at here. Again, it still has that potential, but at least the build up to it. As I mentioned, Max has been out for almost a year. Back-to-back wins, though, over Jose Aldo coming into this fight, both by TKO. He has 12 wins in a row. The last time he lost a fight was against Conor McGregor way back in the day. Not the same fighter at all. And when you look at his track record, Aldo, 2 victories, Anthony Pettis, Ricardo Lamas, Jeremy Stevens, Charles Oliveira, Cub Swanson. He's beat a murderer's row of opposition. For Brian Ortega, he comes into this fight having won 6 consecutive bouts. He had that no contest in his debut, which was originally a submission win. And his list of opponents also very impressive. Clay Guida, Renato Moicano, Cub Swanson, and being the first to finish Frankie Edgar was damn impressive. Physically, Max Holloway 3 inches taller than Ortega. They will have the same 69-inch reach. Max is actually his birthday, December 4th. So he's just turning 27. Brian Ortega also 27, turning earlier in the year. They are physically in their prime. Now, when you look at these two, Brian Ortega is an elite grappler who has drastically improved his striking. For Max Holloway, he's an elite striker who has significantly improved his grappling. Again, well-rounded fighters, gotta love it. Now, the key here for the champion, for Max to win this fight and capitalize on what appears to be Ortega's vulnerability, if it exists, is volume and pace. He averages 6.2 significant strikes per minute. In his just under 6 rounds of action against Jose Aldo, one of the greatest, if the greatest featherweight of all time at this point, Max landed 278 significant strikes. Now, some of those were against a prone Aldo on the mat, but still, that's a big number. He needs to use kicks in this fight to keep Ortega at the distance, and Ortega's willingness to take damage, Max has to capitalize on that. Use his footwork and movement, strike and avoid. Don't brawl. Don't get drawn into multiple exchanges. Let that damage and that volume pile up, but don't get reckless. Ortega's best UFC performance as far as volume is concerned was 65 significant strikes against Moicano, and on his road to get there, he gave up 109. So he had to take almost twice as much damage to land that many strikes. And Ortega has a significant history of falling behind in fights and then having to catch back up. When you look back at the totals, all the way back to the Diego Brandao fight, 56-29 in favor of Brandao. Clay Guida, before he stopped him, 62-62. A lot of people thought Guida was on the verge of a victory. Against, again, Moicano, 109-65. Against Cub Swanson, he was behind 60-24. And even against Frankie Edgar, it was almost even, 27-25 in favor of Edgar before the finish. Now, again, he won all those fights by finish, including 3 in the third round. So he's good at coming back. But the question is, what happens if he can't? If he can't get that finish, he's probably going to lose a decision. And against a guy like Max Holloway, you cannot afford to let Max get rolling. Don't let him start piling up that damage. Don't let him start, finding his groove. He's never been finished before, as far as, by knockout at least. That is a major concern. Now, on the flip side of things, Ortega's striking gets better every single fight. He hits very hard. Less technique than Max Holloway, less volume, but I'd give him the edge in power. And that's the big question, is can Ortega play Max Holloway's game and finish him with strikes? Jose Aldo hit Max Holloway 87 times. Max can be hit. He allows it. Again, in that fight, and we've seen it before with other fighters, Tony Ferguson being a great example, Max drew Aldo into a fight, into a pace that he could not keep. He relied on his durability and his cardio, and he took over when Aldo started to crash, and he put him away. I don't think he can do that here. And I think he's a smart man. If he realizes he can't do that here, he won't. But, it's certainly a concern against like Ortega, who just will push forward and throw almost any technique because he's not afraid to go to the ground. He's incredibly dangerous on the mat. He's so good there that he doesn't care if he gets put on his back. Great. We'll go from there and we'll attack there. And again, when you go back to that Renato Moicano fight, which is, again, Moicano's a monster in itself, and for what Ortega did, that was incredibly impressive. And of course, they've both improved since. Again, he was outlanded almost 2-1 in both rounds 1 and 2, and he was behind in the striking totals in round 3. Yet his concussive power and how heavy he was hitting him and landing on him broke Moicano and led to the finish there. It could be argued that Brian Ortega needs less volume to have an impact. And does that mean that Max Holloway needs to outland him 3-1 in order to do that damage, even 4-1 to have the normal effect he has against other fighters? That's a great question. We also have to take into account that mystery illness that Max Holloway's come out and said we don't know what it is. Has it degraded his ability to take punishment? Will the weight cut situation bring symptoms back? We might not even get this fight. We might get close. And again, same situation, shut it down. But either way, it could, between that and the layoff, we could see Max Holloway not be the same fighter we're used to seeing. Now, on the flip side of things, I keep saying that, looking at Max Holloway, he has improved his grappling significantly. He's a BJ purple belt. He submitted Cub Swanson. He had a good takedown and ground and pound based victory over Anthony Pettis. That's huge. Defensively, the last man to take him down was Clay Collard, and that came back in mid-2014. Since that fight, he has stopped 27 takedown attempts. That's huge. And the product of that has been his distance management and just his balance and ability to shut guys down once they do get on the inside. Incredibly impressive. And you say, well, that's going to take Ortega right out of his element. Ortega has not completed a takedown since his debut. And since his debut, he's only attempted 4 takedowns. Conversely, he's given up 10 takedowns, and his opponents have finally learned, don't go to the mat with this guy. But he's not a guy who relies heavily on takedowns. He is a flash knockout version of a grappler, a submission threat constantly. He doesn't need a takedown to be lethal. Again, he's lethal from top position, he's lethal from bottom, but he showed us in the Cub Swanson fight, he just needs to put your hands on you in a clinch position, and he can submit you. And that has to be a major concern. When he fought Cub, he closed the distance versus Cub. He set up a submission at the end of round 1 and got him in a bad spot. And Cub knew right then, oh boy, I'm in trouble. And he said it was a tight squeeze. It was ridiculous. And yet he knew it was coming, and he couldn't avoid it in round 2, and he got submitted. And you look at Max and you say, Max might be able to stay vertical. But can he maintain that constant gap, avoid the clinch, avoid it even for a few seconds? Can he prevent that for the entirety of this matchup? That's, or at least until his offense takes effect and Brian Ortega becomes a less fighter than we expect from him. Max doesn't have that type of power that's going to back Ortega, that's going to dissuade him from moving forward. He can throw a lot, but Ortega's going to keep pushing forward because he's confident in his chin, he's confident in his ground game, he's going to move forward. Max can't be passive here, but he also has to avoid being too aggressive. He has to walk that thin line before even taking into account what Ortega's game plan is going to be. Max is incredibly good at capitalizing on issues. All those cardio, Pettis' takedown defense, Jeremy Stevens struggled with technical fighters, Cub Swanson's submission defense. He has to capitalize on what Ortega struggles with, which isn't much, but he has to get ahead. He has to capitalize on Ortega's willingness to trade and his tendency to fall behind. Don't brawl, be technical, be diverse, drag him into the deep waters and drown him. That's the champion's key to retaining his title. But ultimately what I think is going to happen is Brian Ortega is going to push forward. He's going to be aggressive. He's going to not let Max find his rhythm, possibly hurt him on the feet, but eventually they're going to tie up, and he's going to set up a submission game, whether he attacks with a guillotine choke, moves to his back position, looks for a rear naked choke, or shows us something flashy we're not expecting. But again, watch for Ortega to get into that clinch and start threatening with submissions, looking for that neck, looking for an opportunity, and he will get it. I don't trust Max after the layoff. I love Max Holloway. He's a great fighter. He's one of my favorite fighters. But my prediction is Brian Ortega to defeat Max Holloway by submission and become the new UFC featherweight champion. So those are my 5 main card predictions for UFC 231. That last prediction was an incredibly long breakdown, but these 2 fighters deserve it. It's going to be an amazing fight. So make sure you check it out. All of my preliminary picks available at kamikazeoverdrive.net. Please check them out as well. The bet packs are going to be for sale for just $15 in the bet shop. So please consider investing there if you're looking to, again, I give you as much information as I possibly can. Mailbet.org. There's a description in the link below if you want to head over there and make your bets. And you can follow me on Twitter at KO_predictions. That's enough for me. It's awfully late here. I need to get to bed. Thanks for tuning in, guys, and I will talk to you very soon.